One of the things that helps me plan out my videos for my YouTube channel, for my real estate business, is frameworks. What do I mean by frameworks? What I mean is like a way of documenting an idea, a way of kind of framing this whole idea and how you're explaining it to your audience. One of the ways I started doing this was with a series that explained kind of the whole area. And it was called the Tampa Explained series. It talked about the whole Tampa area. You get it. And the way that I built this framework was, okay, what are the main things people want to know? How far is it from stuff? So we talked about proximity. What's the kind of general style of the area? So we talked about style. What are the size of the houses and the size of the area? Then, because some people are like, I want to live in a big area. I want to live in a small area. And then we talked about costs. Generally, what's the budget range? Or kind of what's the average? That kind of helps too. So when I built this framework, what I did is I broke down the Tampa area. I explained some kind of premises, kind of explained the framework, explained some kind of maybe confusing parts about the Tampa area in the first few videos. And then I started breaking down the whole metro area, about 4 million people, into these sections. And some of the sections were big, some of the sections were small, but I still defined them by that criteria, and I introduced the series every single time, and I introduced the framework every single time with similar kind of animations. I actually just wrote out the framework, recorded it with a top-down camera. You can see it right here, and just kind of put that up every single time just to kind of create this expectation of what this video was going to deliver. One thing that happened eventually that I mentioned before is people started referring to this series and referring to this framework, and I was really excited to see that happen. But now I want to continue breaking down the area, and I want to compare neighborhoods, and not just any neighborhoods, but kind of master plan communities. These are kind of an interesting thing happening in the US right now, and I was even trying to define what it is. But I want to start talking about these in a similar way to each other. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because one of these communities, it's called Angeline in the Tampa area, is just kind of starting. It's a very new one. It has a lot of development left, so I want to sell a bunch of houses in there. So the goal is still selling. The goal isn't just to provide this kind of content for people. I want them to find value in the content. Even if they find value in the content, I kind of put out this goodwill, they don't use me, and that's fine, whatever, not a big deal. The goal of this content is selling houses. So I started working on some notes of what does it look like. I'm gonna pull up my Notion here. What does it look like to explain a master planned community? Kind of an interesting idea. And then what do people think about communities that's different than what they think about towns? One of the biggest differences is probably amenities. Costs. The costs are a little bit different too. Every time I shoot one of these master planned review videos, I'll start with kind of defining what a master planned community is. Typically, it's a community that's bigger than 2,500 acres, typically has more than 1,000 homes in it, with the goal of it feeling kind of like its own town. It's usually developed by one developer, and now it's really common for them to have multiple builders in this one development. And the main thing there is that the goal of the developer is that it would feel kind of like its own town. What do they do to make it feel kind of like its own town? They bring in, commercial development with it or right outside of it. A lot of these have kind of a grocery store at the entry of the neighborhood. They might have a school within the neighborhood. They might have a library. They might have, parks and trails and all kinds of stuff like that. Let's just start kind of making notes for this. So I do want to start with proximity. Proximity of so we'll define this a little bit more. We'll call it proximity and access. So where it is on the map, proximity to, some of this is think about the questions that people usually ask, like proximity to necessities, and then proximity to special things. Special things for the Tampa area would be downtown, beaches. And then, actually, let's go back up to necessities too, and we'll do special necessities. What do we mean? What do I mean by special necessities, you ask? I mean Trader Joe's. That's what everybody asks about. Not everybody, a lot of people ask about Trader Joe's. They ask about Costco. So those are kind of special necessities, Trader Joe's and Costco. We'll put Whole Foods on the list too, because people do ask a lot about that. And then proximity to the special things is downtown, beaches. We're going to get into like what I think makes these areas special is kind of they each have their own kind of unique claims. And we'll get into those, and some of those are access to things. So style, I like to go into this. Style is usually defined by the developer, and it's usually really consistent. So like one neighborhood, Astoria, is more like craftsman-ish. You can see here the picture, what I'm talking about. Angeline is more like this kind of modern Tuscan style, based on the things that are being built right now. But it's usually pretty consistent throughout the neighborhood. Okay, so next we'll talk about amenities. A lot of these ones right now, they have like lagoons. Crystal lagoons, it's like a thing now. Typical amenities with these are gonna be like clubhouses, pools, courts, trails, things like that. Costs, we'll talk about like a few ranges of costs here probably. It's important to always really put a date when you're talking about costs, like talk about the specific time, the specific market you're in when you're talking about these costs, because some people come back to this video a year later and then they'll reach out and say, hey, you haven't made a video about that area in a year, what are your updates to it? And that's always kind of a good conversation starter too. So costs are always ranges, which makes me think of styles. We'll want to talk about like the style of homes as well, because we'll have single family homes, townhouses, probably not condos in these. Gosh, there's so many layers to this. 55 plus, they're doing these in these neighborhoods now. And then in the midst of this, we'll have like entry level to luxury. So we'll kind of talk about all that there. Timing, when can you go under contract, and when can you close? When can you move in? Then another timing I want to talk about is amenities. What is the timing of the amenities? Because sometimes these are pretty delayed. The clubhouse, like for example in Angeline, there's a school, there's a like cancer research center, there's a farm, there's trails to the lake, which is like it's gonna be like a regional park in the neighborhood. Oh, and then like access, like roads, we'll say road improvements, because there's like construction going on the state road right outside of this neighborhood, so I want to touch on that. Then unique touches. Okay, what is the community actually bragging about? So they're bragging about being efficient. I want to use their exact words. Efficient, connected, healthy. Interesting. So then we'll dig into like their exact things, like how they're saying they're being efficient, connected, and healthy. They're being efficient through use of nature. We'll say preservation of nature instead. They're being efficient with like solar powered streetlights. Connected. I have this thing up in this county called Ultrafy, which is like really just super fast internet. Kind of what you're paying for with a community like this is, we didn't talk about cost. Oh, I need to go back up to cost and add something. One thing we didn't talk about is like the cost of the development. So let's go back up to cost and let's add like additional costs. So this will be CDD and HOA. And sometimes the HOA has a startup and a monthly cost. And then let's say, what if amenities are not finished? Like, do you get a discount on the HOA if like all they're promising isn't there yet? I like that question. One thing I'm demonstrating with a question like that is that I'm a critical thinker. So when you're marketing to potential clients, you want to show so many things in the way that you're thinking, because you want them to like you, and some of that is just your personality, like the stories you tell that show what you're like as a person. But then you want them to trust you. You want them to trust the way you think. And that's more of the stories about how you help clients. So you're telling stories in two different ways throughout these videos, and that's really, really important because they're modeling two different things to potential clients. Okay, connected. How else are they connected? I did notice they're going to do trails through the neighborhood, and then those are going to connect to other trails in the county. And they say 100 miles. I want to know what that is, because if there's obviously not going to be 100 miles of trails in that neighborhood. But I think they're saying they're going to connect to like the Suncoast Trail, which is Pasco County, and then the Pinellas Trail, which is Pinellas County. But I wonder if they're going to connect to like the Upper Tampa Bay Trail as well. Sounds like they're using the 100 miles as kind of a exaggerated number. I don't love that. Okay, next is healthy. Farm. They're doing a farm at this neighborhood. They're doing a school. They're doing cancer research. I'm gonna put all these under healthy because I think that's where they're intending them to be. Outdoor activities. Well, let's just say activities, and then like outdoors. We'll do those as two different things because 3,600 acres of like preserve land is kind of different from just like the pool. The pool is good to go swim in too. So that's kind of my framework for this. And then what I'll do is for another development, when I go talk about Epperson, which is the same developer, so it'll be kind of similar. But say I talk about an older one. It's Westchase, which Westchase in Tampa was like an older master plan community that was started in the late 90s. But if I were to talk about proximity, style, amenities, cost, timing, and then unique touches, I could still talk about Westchase in that framework. And one thing that does for the audience is it lets them kind of know what to expect. It helps them to know what to expect from the video, what to expect from me in the future, and it helps them to know what questions to ask. And then it also helps me to plan future videos because I have this framework now where I'm like, okay, I can just grab this area. I can grab Fishhawk out here to the east of Tampa. And I'm just going to talk about Fishhawk in this framework, in my master plan community framework. Also, just by teaching your audience that you think about things like this just shows so much attention to detail and shows so much critical thinking that you want them to see when they're choosing you to work with you. So this was just me building a framework. Now I need to shoot this Angeline video. I need to do a little bit more research before I actually shoot it. And then I'll go out like on my one wheel, I'll ride around the whole community, I'll fly my drone all around, I'll do all that kind of stuff. But I wanted you to see how I build one of these frameworks. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, I'd love to help in any way that I can. Thanks for coming by.